I was awake when the door opened, and my son was breathing fast beside me. The handle turned slowly and stopped, as if someone inside the hallway had learned our layout. I saw the latch move without a sound and knew the lock had been opened from the outside. I stepped into the corridor, and the apartment felt rearranged by that single motion. A man stood near the shoe rack, and he did not rush or hide. He looked straight at me, and the look said he had measured the distance already. He closed the door behind him with care and left no mark. I froze and counted the seconds while my son coughed in the bedroom. The man nodded once, as if acknowledging a schedule. He walked past me and touched nothing else. The building stayed quiet, and no lights came on. When he reached the stairwell, he paused and turned his head. He smiled without teeth and left. That was the moment it started, and that was also the end. Earlier that night, I had been awake for hours because my son had a fever. I kept water on the nightstand and checked his temperature again and again. Everyone else in the building slept through the rain. The street outside was empty, and the elevator hummed on its own cycles. At 1 a.m, I heard a soft click from the hallway and blamed the pipes. At 2, I smelled soap, as if someone had washed hands nearby. At 3, I moved the chair closer to my son and listened to his breathing. At 4, the handle turned and the room changed shape. The man wore clean clothes and shoes without dirt. He carried nothing and left with nothing. He knew where to stand to block the view from the bedroom. He knew how long a cough lasted. He knew the camera light near the stairs was burned out. He knew the neighbor worked nights. He knew the door would open because it had been opened before. I did not scream, and he did not rush. He passed the kitchen, and the table stayed set. He passed the mirror and did not look. He passed the window, and the curtain did not move. He paused by the thermostat and left it untouched. He left no sound behind him. I locked the door after he left, and the lock felt new. I stood there until my legs shook. My son slept again, and his fever eased. Dawn came slow and gray. I waited for morning to explain the rest. In the morning, the building woke as usual, and nothing looked wrong. The neighbor across the hall cried when she found her place emptied. Her door showed no damage, and her key still fit. She said someone had been inside while she slept. I listened and kept my eyes down. I made breakfast and cleaned the cups from the night. My son asked why the door had been locked twice. I told him I wanted quiet. The hallway smelled like soap again. The neighbor listed what was gone, and the list sounded practiced. She said the person knew where things were kept. She said nothing was broken. She said it felt personal. I remembered the nod. I remembered how he closed the door. I remembered how he measured the space. I went back through the night in order. At 9 p.m, I had taken out the trash. A man stood by the stairs and held the rail. He asked which floor I lived on. I told him, and he smiled politely. He said he had just moved in. He asked if the locks were tricky. I said the hallway door sometimes stuck. He thanked me and let me pass. I heard him try the handle after I entered. I heard the click and did nothing. Later, I heard the soap smell and ignored it. Later, I heard the pipes and blamed them. Later, I heard the cough and focused on my son. The man had been mapping the place in daylight. He had learned the rhythm of sleep. He had learned the sound of illness. He had learned which doors mattered. He had learned which did not. The neighbor stopped crying and went quiet. I offered water, and she refused. She stared at my door longer than needed. I closed it gently. I knew the night was not finished. That evening, I checked every hinge and screw. I moved furniture to change paths. I slept on the floor near my son. The building settled into routine again. The rain returned and covered small sounds. At midnight, the hallway light went out. I stayed awake and counted breaths. At 1, the elevator stopped between floors. At 2, a step crossed the mat outside. The handle did not turn. The door stayed still, and the quiet stretched. At 3, the soap smell returned stronger. Water ran in the neighbor apartment. Pipes knocked in a steady pattern. At 4, the handle turned again. The lock opened without force. He entered with the same calm. He closed the door with care. He stood where I could see him. He raised one finger as if asking for time. My son coughed and sat up. The man shifted to block the view again. He spoke my name once. He said it as if reading it. He said he had come for balance. He said the other place had been easy. He said this one required patience. He stepped toward the bedroom. I stepped in front of him. He stopped and smiled without teeth. He said I had noticed too much. He reached into his pocket and showed a key. It was my spare key. He said it had been left under the mat. He said habits travel. He said he would leave things even. He said he would not wake my son. He moved past me anyway. The bedroom door opened. The night made its choice. I followed and stood in the doorway. My son was awake and watching. The man did not rush. He picked up the medicine bottle. He read the label out loud. He set it back exactly. He took the pillow and pressed it gently. He waited for the coughing to stop. He counted like a nurse. He removed the pillow and stepped back. My son lay still. The man nodded once. He said balance was restored. He said illness made noise. He said quiet made sense. He wiped his hands with soap from his pocket. He placed the spare key on the table. He closed the bedroom door. He left the apartment clean. I stayed where I was. Morning came with birds and traffic. The neighbor knocked and asked if I was okay. I opened the door and answered calmly. She said she had slept through everything. She said the water had been running all night. She said she would move soon. I made tea and watched steam rise. I washed the pillowcase twice. I packed my son's clothes in a small bag. I told the landlord the lock felt loose. I did not say more. I buried my son that afternoon. The certificate listed complications. The building kept its routine. The hallway smelled clean. The spare key stayed on the table. I moved the mat away from the door. I stopped sleeping. Everyone slept peacefully that night. I was awake when it ended.